Welcome to our present state versus history on Speaker. Here we are focused on the current events of our culture through the principles of our history, trying to make sense of the culture and the mindset of today. I am your host, Ray Mayfield. Well, good day, folks. Really appreciate you guys listening to these podcasts and helping us get the word out. Keep hitting that follow button if you would, subscribe, whatever it is. Really helps us out when you get the traffic going. We're monitoring here and getting ready to upgrade the system where maybe we won't have to be depleting some of the pre-recorded episodes we've already got on Speaker. Appreciate you listening. I got into an article this weekend that I just felt like I really wanted to address some of these issues that I'm seeing come into. I tried to refine the news article that Fox News put out on the justices on our Supreme Court who are listening to the arguments about whether or not our OSHA system has the authority to mandate these vaccines and on and on. And I don't want to get into all of the mandates and the vaccines, whether you ought to take it, whether you shouldn't take it, and the coronavirus and all these things, because this is a way bigger issue than that. And I really wanted to get into some of these quotes that they had quoted that these justices of ours had mentioned about their viewpoints, because they haven't made a ruling yet, and they just listened to the arguments coming back and forth. And you know, that's the system. The lawyers have a right to make both their cases either side, and the justices are supposed to be listening to it. But we are supposed to be making decisions on the Supreme Court based on facts and law. And that goes back to some of this that we were talking about earlier. I have a episode on the Speaker right now that's entitled Right Reason, talking about how we have been driven into this frenzy of emotionalism into our country, and all of our decision making is being driven by our emotion instead of right reason, fact, logic, absolutes, if you will. And these statements that these justices were making were, you know, things based like you hear out here in everyday's talk about how, you know, well, we're in a pandemic, so, you know, the government needs extra authority, and we have all these things going on, and all those arguments that we could sway back and forth all over. But my point here is, these justices, I don't care what side of the aisle their political viewpoints are, they are supposed to be sitting on our Supreme Court because they have proven themselves as individuals throughout their career that have the capacity to lay all of their personal feelings, all their personal opinions of how things should be aside and make rulings of cases that are brought before them based completely upon law. We are not supposed to be basing our opinions upon things that are all this around. You know, whether or not the government ought to have extra authority for pandemic situations and all of these things, blah, 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 is irrelevant. The First Amendment of our Constitution says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress or grievance. See, we have the right to move and establish in the freedoms of this country. And it doesn't matter what our reasoning is for it. Medical procedures and things like this are all part of that personal accountability that is covered right there. It's just pretty basic. I don't have a law degree. I don't need a law degree to be able to understand common sense. This whole thing is way bigger than whether you ought to be taking this vaccine or not. I don't even want to get into that subject. The government has no authority to mandate anybody taking a medical procedure or not taking a medical procedure. That's the subject here. It's cut and dry. The law is very clear. The United States government does not have the authority to do what it's trying to do. We are in the midst right now of such an overreach of power by our government because we, the people, have allowed them. This should not even be an issue of debate. This is the point. Because by law, it's very simple. It's very cut and dry. If you want to get a vaccine, get it. If you don't want to get a vaccine, then don't. Oh, well, you're violating my rights. No. In the United States of America, you have the right to do whatever it is you feel necessary to protect yourself. If you think you don't want people that are not vaccinated around you, then you have a right to put a sign up. You have a right to, if you're a business owner, say you can't come in here. And, as a member of the society, if I choose not to get that vaccine and I see that sign, then I honor that sign and I have the right to go someplace else and spend my money. That's what makes this system work. Oh, well, people are going to die. You know what? When this whole epidemic, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, thing got started, there was a guy got on the radio. I can't remember who it was, what radio program it was, but he says, little known fact, 10,000 people a year die from snake bite. And he was putting the number thing into perspective is what he was doing. But the point that he made has still resonated with me today because there has been so much misinformation, so many lies, so much miscalculation of numbers. We will never know the truth. But the fact of the matter is, in the grand scheme of things, there are a lot of people that die every year by a lot of things. Now, I'm not trying to take away from the deaths that have come from this sickness and disease, but, I take care of a cemetery down here in the local areas. And back when that Spanish flu come through this area, there was a lot of people died within days. These communities around here, they spent almost every day burying somebody that they were either related to or very close to in these cemeteries around here. But there was no government coming in here and telling them people how to deal with that. They dealt with it accordingly. And the amazing thing is there's one grave down there in that cemetery where the mother and 3 of her babies were all buried within days of each other. But yet, I think it's 12 years later, the husband or father of that house who lived in that very house, his stone's death date. So we don't know what these sicknesses are going to do, how they're going to affect people. That man lived in that same house that his whole family perished from that thing, and evidently he didn't. What do we do with that? We live in the truth of the matter. These things are unpredictable, and it's called life. As tragic as it might be, we have to deal with it. But we cannot afford our government to be able to infringe upon the ability to operate in those means within our society, because if they do and they take a little ground here, then we're going to have more to deal with later. We've got already going on in the Congress and the Senate. They're arguing and they're fighting over whether the federal government ought to be taking control of the election system because of all the fraudulent behavior and everything that took place in our last election. And I don't care which side of the aisle you're on that. I know and you know that there was fraudulent behavior that took place. That election was a joke. We got more votes counted than we got people that voted, okay? I don't care how you cut that. Something's wrong. When we got this man named Clayburn, he's arguing that the federal government needs to take place. And part of his arguments are, he says that what is true today was not true then, talking about the past of the founding fathers. He says, therefore, the kind of changes that we need and the kind of modifications that we need, they must fit our times. And then he says that just because we have a little nugget of the past in 1876 doesn't mean that it's true in 1976. The country has matured, he says, and we as people, we must mature right along with it. Now that sounds pretty good on the surface, doesn't it? But here's a problem with that. The Constitution of the United States of America is not a document that was formed to be a how-to manual on a government. The reason why the Constitution of the United States has been so successful for so long is because it is a document that those men put together to critique and control the wickedness of man when his nature becomes corrupt, when he has been entrusted with too much power. This is the reason this document has succeeded so well for so long, because the human animal, the human nature has not changed. This is why it's so important that we understand the Word of God and we understand these things in our very fiber of who we are and who we've been intended to be. You go back to Cain and Abel, the very first related siblings that we've got record of in the Bible, and what happened there? One of them got mad at the other one because he thought he was the reason for his inability to get what he wanted, and what did he do? He killed him. We didn't have guns then. We didn't have all these weapons of warfare, all this mass technology, did we? We had a stick and a club, and he beat him to death out there in the garden where they were planting crops, and buried him. Why? Selfish ambition. Nothing's changed. So we can take this logic that this Clayburn guy is talking about, and we gotta change with the times. We gotta go, we're a more modern society. We've grown up, right? We know we shouldn't be killing each other, don't we? I mean, after all, we've evolved into these educated beings, and we're just love one another, right? So let's just get rid of the law that we have that says you can't kill another person for no apparent reason whatsoever. Well, look at the money we would save. We wouldn't have all these court systems. We get rid of all these law enforcement officers that are so abusive. We wouldn't have all these jails. We wouldn't have all these criminals to be taken care of. We'd be all living in peace and harmony, wouldn't we? Because we wouldn't be having that. But you know what else would happen? The murder rate would go through the roof. You know why? Because if I'm driving down the road and somebody makes me mad, I'm going to shoot him in the face because he's in my way. You say that's not going to happen? Well, it's happening right now, for Pete's sake, and we got laws that says we can't do that, but we do it anyway. What's changed? Nothing. We have to have laws on the books that maintain order. Why? Because man, contrary to the psychosis people of today, is inherently evil. We want our own way. We want what we want when we want it. I mean, good grief, a hamburger outfit made millions and millions of dollars with that slogan on their commercial. Remember when we were kids? Have it your way and get it now. Woohoo! Huh? Nothing's changed. If we go back and look at our Constitution in the late 40s and the early 50s, we had this thing put together in our government called the Reese Committees. I mean, I did a deal on the YouTube channel, I believe it was, here a while back on that whole thing. I'm not going to get into it today, but basically what that broke down to was social studies. And we remember in school, we studied social studies. And, we think, well, that's the study of social societies that have grown and fallen. Well, to some degree it is. But what our government is using it for is to study the social behavior of society and how they can do things to manipulate that society to accomplish a given task or goal. And they've been doing it for years. And you say, well, that's not going on. Well, baloney. Look at your phone. Look at Facebook. It's obvious today. You get on that telephone, you start typing certain things in there. I'm a mechanic by trade, and I go in there and look for parts up. When I pull stuff up on that Google search thing, you know where it automatically goes? It goes to those parts things. It goes to the places where I go all the time. Well, why is that? Because they're studying my behavior. They're learning what I like, and they're learning what information to feed me to get my thought process to go in the direction they want it to go. And so therefore we can direct the masses in the direction we should go. That's why we have such a situation in our society today where everybody's driven off of emotion. The media's feeding into it. The social systems that we're using every day are feeding into it. And we are blind to it because we don't even realize it's going on. But we need to wake up and realize what's happening. They changed our Constitution in the 1900s. Before that, everything was running along. They were drawing money off of trades and things, and this government was doing just fine. And we didn't have the things that's going on with the Senate stuff, which is what they're arguing here where Clayburn's talking about. They're trying to get into our voting. They're trying to change the Electoral College. They're trying to change all of these things that are the checks and the balances to keep us in a place where we are balanced and protected. So we say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, before the 1913